Alrighty, guys. Okay. Alright, much better. Hey, guys. So, this is Major G, and before I watched the, what is it, fourth, sorry. Before I watched the fourth episode of Supergirl, I'm going to talk a little bit about who exactly Mon-El is. And the reason for that is because when I was going through a bunch of reactions, I noticed, for the third episode, I noticed that not a lot of people seem to know who Mon-El is. So, I'm going to kind of break off from that and talk about a little bit about who exactly Mon-El is. And when you talk about Mon-El, you kind of have to go back to his story leads to one of my favorite supergroups, if not my favorite supergroup in all of comics, and that is, my fans are going to know this, none other than the Legion of Superheroes. So the Legion of Superheroes is a group from the 31st century, and they are basically the sole superhero group of the 31st century. Unlike present day, where you have Justice League, you have the Outsiders, you have the JSA, you have Teen Titans, and a number of other groups around. You have the Bat Family, that kind of thing. However, in the 30th century, there's basically only the Legion. Now, there is a secondary group called the Legion of Secondary Heroes, or something like that. And these are the people who weren't exactly good enough to get into the Legion. And they talk about it a little bit in the animated series. But the Legion is the sole superhero group, and because of that, they are a group that has like either hundreds or thousands of members in their ranks. So there's a ton of superheroes in the Legion. And Mon-El is a part of the Legion of Superheroes. However, his story doesn't start out that way. And when you talk about not only Mon-El, and when you talk about the Legion, you have to go back to Superman. So back in the 60s, I want to say, I don't know if a lot of people realize this. I was arguing with somebody on YouTube on the on Watch Mojo's top 10 superheroes with the best fighting ability list, and apparently a lot of people hadn't really heard of Karate Kid, who didn't make the list, even though he is the best fighter in all of comics. Hands down, bar none, Karate Kid is the best fighter. And uh, it was brought up that when we were talking about some of Karate Kid's, when a couple of us were talking about some of Karate Kid's feats, we were talking about how he would fight Superboy. And they're like, oh yeah, so what? Connor Kent, whatever. It's like, no. We're not talking about Connor Kent. We're talking about the original Superboy. The original Superboy was young Clark Kent, young Kal-El. It was the adventures of young Superman back in Smallville, Kansas. So essentially, Superboy was a comic series, I think in the 60s or 70s. They even turned it into a TV show in the 80s. And it was about young Clark Kent. And it was essentially kind of like Smallville, except he could fly and he had his super suit. Like he had the full power set. And so they were kind of goofy comics because they were meant for kids. And so during the Superboy comics, they introduced a group from the 31st century called the Legion of Superheroes. And they invite Superman or Superboy to go and join the Legion. And so he goes to the future and he joins them for a little bit, which is why Superman was one of the people that was mentioned, or one of the main characters of the Legion animated series. Or part of the reason why. And so, so anyway, at some point when Superboy is in Kansas, in present day, this is the 60s, he comes across this other alien. The other alien, this other alien, he looks kind of like him in terms of like has the same kind of features, dark hair, and he has an inverted kind of suit as to Superman. So Superman and Supergirl, if you notice, have a blue suit with like red underwear and cape and boots, whereas Mon-El has a red suit with a blue cape and like I think he has blue boots or just regular boots or something like that. And so Mon-El. So I believe, if I remember correctly, Mon-El was an amnesiac. I think that's what happened. I think he was an amnesiac. And Superboy, having not grown up on Krypton, was just like, oh wow, here's another kid who's just like me. They met on Earth. Daxamites had the exact same power set as Kryptonians. So he could fly, he had super strength, he had super speed, every single power that Superboy had. Mon-El had. And Superboy actually names him Mon-El. Because El is, of course, Superman's last name, his Kal-El, Jor-El. And I forgot what Mon was for, but I think it had something to do with him being the sole survivor of his planet or something like that. And basically, Superboy gives him this name to show that they're like family. And once again, keep in mind this is the 60s, so this is going to actually turn up in the. So this is going to come around to what happens later to him. So Superboy and Mon-El become best friends, and they're like hanging out and superheroing together and all this stuff. And after some time, Mon-El starts getting sick, like super sick. I think it's within a couple of days or something like that. I don't think it was that long. But Mon-El starts getting sick, and he starts getting sicker and sicker and just sicker with time. And I mean literally sick. Like he's like basically Superman next to Kryptonite sick. And through some way, I forget, I don't remember the specifics on exactly how, come to find out, Mon-El's weakness is lead. So this is the 60s. Lead is in everything. It's in the gas, it's in the houses, it's in the paint, it's in everything. So all this exposure to lead makes Mon-El ridiculously sick. It's just like trace amounts of lead. And so they can't figure out how to Superboy can't figure out how to help him out. So what ends up happening is that they end up throwing him into the Phantom Zone. They're like, Mon-El, we can't really do anything for you. So they either throw him into the Phantom Zone, or they send him back out into space or something like that, so that he can find someplace else where he's not next to death. He's not knocking on death's door the entire time he's there. And essentially, where the Legion comes in is that, and I'm pretty sure this is the Phantom Zone. He gets thrown into the Phantom Zone. And so the Legion, being the Legion, somehow comes across Mon-El. Like they're investigating the Phantom Zone or whatever. So, because the Legion is always doing all sorts of science-y stuff. And so Mon-El, they find Mon-El, they cure him of his lead poisoning. This is 1,000 years in the future. They either cure him of it or there's no lead in that time. I forget the specifics of it, but essentially Mon-El is perfectly fine in the 31st century. And so he becomes a member of the Legion. He becomes their Superman. Their new Superman, I'm sorry. He becomes their new Superman. So yeah. That is essentially the story of Mon-El. And in terms of how this is going to work with Supergirl, I'm fairly sure that we are going to meet the Legion, because we know that the Legion exists in the Supergirl timeline, or in the Supergirl universe, because she went to which the episode in the first season when she went to Superman's Fortress of Solitude, the Legion ring was right there, the Legion flight ring. And so the Legion flight ring isn't. So now I have to talk about the membership of the Legion. The main people in the Legion of Superheroes are. By the way, this is also why anyway. So the main members of the Legion of Superheroes, the founding members, are Cosmic Boy. Oh my gosh. Cosmic Boy, Lightning Lad, Saturgirl, and Brainiac 5, and I think one other person. These are the main members of the Legion. And essentially the founding members. Now, they have goofy names. The most, something like 60%, 60 or 70% of the Legion members have really, really stupid names. And it's because they took the they took the traditional superhero route in picking their names, because how the Legion was formed was that they were in the 31st century. There's no superheroes. Everybody all the humans, aliens, everybody. They all know each other. It's one big melting pot. The galaxy is one big melting pot, and so almost everybody has powers, apparently. There's a ton of people with powers. A lot of people are just aliens, and because they're aliens, they have quote-unquote powers. primary example being Saturn Girl. Saturn Girl is a telepath, and that's because her people are telepaths. Think if you've ever seen Star Trek: The Next Generation, she's essentially a Betazoid. She's essentially a full-blooded Betazoid. Her people don't speak verbally at all; they just communicate telepathically. That's it. She's a telepath. Brainiac 5. Brainiac 5 is from Kolu, which is the planet with the smartest inhabitants in the entire universe. And Brainiac 5 is the smartest of all of them. By the way, the name is not a coincidence. Brainiac 5 is actually the descendant of Superman's nemesis, Brainiac. Little bit of trivia too. Indigo, who was played by Laura Vandervoort in the first season of Supergirl, also technically a descendant of Brainiac. In fact, she's supposed to be from farther in the future than Brainiac 5. And Brainiac 5 is actually organic. He is essentially his planet. Let's see. There's a couple of origins for Brainiac. There's one where the most famous one being that he was once an AI from Krypton. There's also one where he is from Kolu. There's which is Brainiac 5's planet, and Brainiac was once the smartest person on Kolu, and managed to convince the people of Kolu to increase their intelligence with computer implants. And so he became the smartest out of all of them, and he eventually ended up making himself turning himself into a fully digitized form or something like that, so that you can never really get rid of Brainiac. The only way to get rid of you're supposed to be able to get rid of Brainiac is by locking him in a system, and then completely shutting down that system or destroying that system, which is very, very difficult and that's how he gets away all the time, is that some little piece of his consciousness always escapes on this something. And so he has passed on his consciousness through the years into different forms, or through the centuries into different forms, Brainiac 5 being the Legion. He has the intelligence of Brainiac, but he is not Brainiac himself. He is essentially an offspring of Brainiac. So anyway, yeah, most of the Legion have really goofy names because they committed to the traditional name of creating superhero names, which, if you've ever seen the movie Sky High, they talk about that a little bit in one of the classes. Very good movie. If you've never seen it, Sky High is awesome. If you like superhero movies. There's a scene when they're in a classroom, and Dave Foley, that's the guy's name. So Dave Foley, who's playing like a Robin, like a 60s Batman Robin-ish kind of character, and there's like a little equation on the board that says like power plus gender equals superhero name or something like that, and that's essentially what they subscribe to, the Legion. Most of them do. So that's how you get names like Bouncing Boy, Lightning Lad, Star Boy, Cosmic Boy, stuff like that. So most of them have really, really goofy names. Let's see. Oh yeah, so yeah, those are the. Oh yes, so anyway, the Legion rings were created by Brainiac 5, who is the smartest being of that era. Yeah, by the way, side note, Brainiac 5 might not... even though he's not necessarily a bad guy, he is always got some he's always got some kind of like ultimate master plan going on or something. Like he's always thinking like 20 steps ahead of everybody else. So a lot of the times he has to make the hard decisions. He's the one and he comes off as really, really cold and extremely logical because of that. So yeah, it's hard for me. Like Nick Fury, he's a lot like Nick Fury. Let me put it that way. He's a lot like Nick Fury. Where he has to make all these morally ambiguous decisions, and you're like wondering what side he's on. So, but ultimately, it's always on the side of the Legion. So, anyway, Brainiac 5 made the Legion flight rings, and the Legion flight rings they're only given to members, and they're specifically coded to that member's DNA. Also, they do a ton of things. They're a communicator. They're an environmental suit, so you can go into space with them. They act as they give you flight. They give anyone flight. What else? A few other things I can't really think of off the top of my head, but they do a ton of stuff. The flight rings do. So yeah, that's essentially who Mon-El is, and that's a little bit about who the Legion is. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Have you ever heard of Mon-El before or anything like that? Personally, I'm looking forward to this. To see, I'm actually just a really, really big fan of the Legion. So I'm just glad that there's any sort of anything on the Legion, because it's very rare you ever, like, their comic series don't actually last very long, for whatever reason. And they only show up a handful of times in anything that wasn't their own show. So far, if you want to see anything about them, the best thing to watch is the Legion of Superheroes cartoon show.
We belong to the Legion of Superheroes. We want you to join us.
Their characters have also shown up in terms of live action. This is only the second time they've shown up. The first time being in Smallville.
Who are you? What's going on?
Kal-El, it is an absolute honor and a privilege.
How do you know that name?
We are the Legion.
We've come from the 31st century. Hey, Cal. Where's your cape?
Cape?
Oddly enough, they never showed up in, they apparently never showed up in the Superboy TV show. I'll have to go through that and check, because I have it. But I haven't heard anything about them showing up in that show. But so far, yes, they only showed up in, so Supergirl, and even though he's not a Legion member yet, he should become a Legion member, because that's what happens to Mon-El, is he ends up becoming a Legion member. And Superman is a Legion member, because he has the flight ring at the Fortress of Solitude. And then they've shown up in Justice League Unlimited.
Sorry. Chuck Tane. Codename Bouncing Boy.
Why did you bring us here?
We're part of a group called the Legion of Superheroes.
A galaxy-spanning force, not unlike your Justice League.
They've shown up in that movie JLA Adventures, Trapped in Time, and what else have they shown up in? I want to say that's it. Yeah, I think it was just... Oh, Superman. The Adventures of Superman. They had showed up in the Adventures of Superman, Justice League Unlimited, JLA Adventures in Time, the TV show, Legion of Superheroes, Smallville, and Supergirl. So, yeah, that's it about the Legion. If you guys want to know more about them, I'll be glad to talk about them. You guys know I'm a huge Karate Kid fan. Karate Kid, being from the Legion of Superheroes, is one of only 2 members of the Legion of Superheroes who doesn't actually have any powers. And the second being Invisible Kid. But Invisible Kid never actually goes into the field. He just stays in the headquarters. Also, you might be able to say Princess Projectora. Well, she has powers. Yeah, she has powers. Yeah, so once again, I'm a big fan of Karate Kid. Love Karate Kid. Karate Kid is the best fighter in all of comicdom, and he just doesn't get nearly enough love. So yeah. So until next time, you guys, I will see you guys later.
How she got her power is that in the DC Comics there's a speedster who a lineage of speedsters, a father-daughter team, who gain their powers by figuring out an equation to the Speed Force. And by knowing this equation, that gives them, that allows them to tap into the Speed Force and gain